Now, physical violence is something that we understand. It's all the wars and killings and beatings and murders and rapes and all the kinds of violence where we use physical force against people. But passive violence is something that we tend to ignore. It's the kind of violence where we don't use any physical force. But nevertheless, we hurt people consciously and unconsciously, directly or indirectly. And that is in the form of discrimination, oppression, suppression, economic, political, social, cultural, religious, all of these things. In fact, Grandfather wrote down the 7 sins of the world, which he said were responsible for all the violence that we experience today. And the 7 sins are wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity, worship without sacrifice, and politics without principles. And I added the 8th one recently, and that is rights without responsibilities. Now, many of these fall under the category of passive violence, where we don't use any physical force, but we hurt people. And the connection between passive violence and physical violence, Grandfather explained to me, is that we perform passive violence consciously and unconsciously against people. And that generates anger in the victim. And the victim then resorts to physical violence to get justice. So it is passive violence that ignites physical violence. So logically, if we want to cut off or put out the fire of physical violence, we have to cut off the fuel supply. And the fuel supply comes from each one of us. Consciously and unconsciously, all of us are contributing to the violence there. And that's why Grandfather said that we must become the change that we wish to see in the world. It has to begin with us. We have to live non-violently, we have to think non-violence, practice non-violence, so that we can reduce the passive violence and save the world from physical violence. We also need to understand that because of this kind of passive violence that we commit, we destroy relationships, not only between nations, but relationships even at home, between our siblings and ourselves and our friends and our colleagues and in our nation. Today, unfortunately, relationships are perhaps the worst that can be imagined. We see this all the time, relationships breaking up. And why is this happening? Because relationships are based on self-interest. In the kind of society that we are trying to create here, it's a selfish society. It's based on selfishness. And even when we bring up our children, we tell them that they have to be successful in life, they have to reach the top in life, get a good job, get good salaries and whatever, but reach the top and reach by any means possible. Don't think about anybody else, think about yourself. These are kind of messages we give to our children. And so they become selfish when they grow up, and that's how this whole society has become selfish and self-centered. And Grandfather said that relationships between people and between nations must be built on the 4 principles of respect, understanding, acceptance, and appreciation. We have to respect ourselves and respect each other and respect our connection with all of creation. And then we will understand who we are and what we are and why are we here on earth. We are not born just to wait until death takes us away. We are born for a purpose. But many of us have not even bothered to look at what is the purpose of our life and what are we contributing to this country or the nation or the society we live in. And so we just pass the time of day. We have a purpose here and we need to find that purpose. And when we understand that we will be able to accept each other as human beings.